So loads of people asked me to take a look at Spinlaunch, which intends to revolutionize access to space.
A U.S. aerospace company is building a huge centrifuge to launch spacecraft into orbit. The centrifuge's electric motor will spin the tethered rocket for an hour to build up speed. Once the rocket is ratcheted up to speed at over 5,000 miles per hour, the release mechanism will cut the vehicle loose and let it fly through the 35-degree launch tunnel.
And then they had this demonstration of it working this week. Just look at that pure sense of achievement, a massive breakthrough. Just look at all the confetti, right? Or is this maybe more like the Hyperloop demo video? You know, where all the achievements have to be fluffed out with things like countdowns, because countdowns were used on one of the most iconic achievements of mankind ever.
Ignition sequence starts. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Tower cleared.
So if we replicate such a countdown, that must mean that our achievements are truly magnificent and world-changing as well. And of course, you've got to make lots of misty-eyed, vague promises about how your new invention, which might actually be hundreds of years old and never left the drawing board before for very good reasons, is going to change everything. Let's watch.
We're driven to explore, to connect, to innovate.
Space is full of resources and opportunities we can't even necessarily think of yet.
To muster the courage to take a giant leap forward.
The possibilities that arise when you have lower cost access to space can have great impact to the world.
The time has come to ask ourselves again, what is the future we want to build?
Capcom, you are a go for launch countdown.
Pegasus, this is Capcom.
All right, everybody prepare for launch.
Prepare for launch in 10.
Enable countdown. 9, 8,
7, 6,
7, 6, 5,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, launch.
3, 2, 1, fire.
Today, the first people traveled safely on a Hyperloop.
The pressure's good, everything works.
Oh my god, I'm so proud of you guys.
So is this a real achievement, which is Spinlaunch's best kept secret, entirely worthy of a slow motion resting gasm face? Or is this a more modest achievement? Be kind of sad if it could be outclassed by, say, a drunk man in charge of a 100-year-old artillery piece. Now I'm going to take my hat off to him for building a massive, expensive vacuum chamber out in the middle of the desert. No, not that one, this one. Look, the widest span vacuum chamber in the world, which might turn out to be a problem later. Which is my first problem. You know, there's a general rule with big vacuum systems that they're clean metal surfaces on the inside. You know, so if there's loads of, say, for instance, rust on the inside of your tube, this is a sign that you don't know what the hell you're doing with vacuum systems. Now, the very first thing I noticed about the Hyperloop within seconds was that it was completely rusted up on the inside, completely, which kind of diminishes the grandiose claims of what you're going to do with that vacuum system.
Imagine going from New York to Washington, D.C. or L.A. to San Francisco in less than an hour in one of these giant vacuum tubes.
Oh man, this is a heavy door. Okay, so what if I told you that there was a mode of transportation that not only promised to leave planes, trains, and automobiles all in the dust? It seems like the people crying debunked are assuming that all of the scientists and engineers at SpaceX and all these universities haven't taken a grade 11 physics course.
Yes, well, one that tells you that steel rusts when it gets wet. Anyway, so this is my first problem with their vacuum chamber, is it's got piles of dirt and dust around in it. Not a good look for a system where the quality of the vacuum will be critical to its functioning. And the idea is you're basically going to spin objects up till they're fast enough, then you're going to lob them into the sky. Now, spinny things are good for adding energy like this, something that anyone who's seen Robot Wars or BattleBots will know well. Yeah, the practical reason why axes are limited is you have a limited amount of time to put the energy into them. A fraction of a second. Whilst with a spinner, you can add energy over a period of seconds, which means you can add a lot more energy to a spinny thing. Well, it's the same deal here.
The centrifuge's electric motor will spin the tethered rocket for an hour to build up speed. Once the rocket is ratcheted up to speed at over 5,000 miles per hour,
the issue is they want to get the tips of this thing going about 2,000 meters per second. With the speed of sound being about 300 meters per second. They want the tip of this to be going about 7 times the speed of sound. Or that would be about 50 times more energy than something going the speed of sound. And the problems with that are legion, which is why they've not done it yet. Now, to spin something up to going supersonic here on Earth basically isn't possible. The air is too thick and soupy. Even with some fairly big engines like in planes, at sea level, where the air is thick, where the atmospheric pressure is 1 atmosphere, the speed record there is only just over the speed of sound, about 1,000 miles per hour. By the time you're getting up to the Blackbird, which flew at about 3 times the speed of sound, that had to go up 25 kilometers, a quarter of the way to space, where there is only about 0.05 of an atmosphere. And at that point, the skin was getting pretty toasty from the Mark III. The windscreen there got over 300 degrees Celsius. You see, this is universally the problem with things going this fast when there's even small amounts of air present. Air molecules only travel at about the speed of sound. So once you're going much faster than the speed of sound, any object basically acts as a compressional heater. So for instance, when you deorbit something comes down from orbit, it's going about 20 times the speed of sound. So let's say you've got a random body and it's moving through the air molecules are moving about the speed of sound. So in the upper limit, by the time these air molecules have moved out of the way of your object will have gone through 20 times that distance, which gives you a compression ratio of about 20 to 1, which gives you an expected external temperature of about 1,000 degrees Celsius. And also, you're mostly in a vacuum, which means that your main mechanism of being able to dump that heat is via radiation. This is the real problem with these mass launchers, is you need them to operate in a vacuum, a very good vacuum. Yeah, which means that you've got your centrifuge happily spinning away there at 7 times the speed of sound. It's not going to happen in atmospheric pressure. Well, not without the arm melting. Now, in the current case, it probably doesn't greatly matter because what they're launching is barely supersonic, if supersonic at all. And for reference, your typical battleship gun would fire things over 2 times the speed of sound, with the exception, of course, that with your battleship guns, the shell went where you pointed the gun. I mean, one of the things you'll notice about their test here is their shell doesn't come out straight. Basically, their release mechanism is screwed up or something, which is not entirely unsurprising. The centrifuge is doing about 2 revolutions per second, or it's rotating about 700 degrees per second, call it 1,000, which means that if you want a trajectory within 1 degree, you have to get the timing release within about a millisecond. But that's maybe not their problem here. Their projectile is tumbling. In fact, they were actually fairly lucky that they didn't destroy their chamber here. So let's take a look at the amazing video of this machine actually working. This is what's going to convince us that this is going to be an amazing, revolutionary new way of getting low-cost satellites to orbit. What? That was it. And yeah, it's an entire 7 seconds of video. First thing you notice is that great portions of these screens are actually blurred out with stuff that you wouldn't have thought was so important, like why are you blurring out the actual scale on the vacuum? That seemed like that would be terribly important. Does it? So let's break this down into segments. And the first one that we're going to look at is the actual missile emerging from the window. Very nice piece of slow motion footage. But hang on a second. Something's not quite right here. Something's very not quite right here. You see, the thing is that if this was emerging in a nice straight line from the tube, then you would expect the exit point of the tip of the missile to be the same as the exit point of the back of the missile. So the front of the missile exits there, and the back exits in exactly the same. Oh, the back doesn't exit in the same place. In fact, the back exits like hugely off. Like, what? It's got like a 30-degree twist on this or something. It's got a huge twist on it. Seeing this has just been released or something by their mechanism, that's a huge twist to have on their missile. And okay, well, let's take a look at the actual bit where you can actually see the missile being thrown up into the sky. And it's like, hang on, is that really tumbling like I think it's tumbling? If we go through this frame by frame, so the missile is, where is it? Here. That's like rotated by almost 90 degrees. Then it's normal again. Now it's 90 degrees again. And that's basically it. And yeah, if you think that's not flying in a very straight line, there's probably a good reason for it. It looks like it shoots off to the side first, and then, after spinning for a bit, actually straightens out. And the reason for that, well, you actually go through and plot up a trajectory for it. So this is overlapping the frames and drawing a trajectory for their missile. So the missile is here, and now it's here. And the reason it looks all funny, of course, is you only visualize it where it's not spinning. That's the sort of center of gravity of the missile. And yeah, it's actually, it's well, yeah, I mean, this is like 90 degrees at the moment. So the missile is not going straight, and it's spinning like crazy. Then there's the last piece of footage, which again was this sort of slow motion distance shot. And that's weird. Why didn't they show it coming all the way out and going all the way up? That would be much more impressive, right? Hang on a second. Let's just draw up the trajectory between the end of the tube there and where our object is. And it's about there somewhere. Let's just make that a little more transparent so you can actually see. And then, so what we're going to do is going to put on a line that is basically parallel to the tube. And if I had to guess what actually happened is it did more or less come out the tube straight, but at a funny angle. And yeah, the second it hits the atmosphere, of course, the aerodynamics start having an effect. So it actually hooks over to the side. And then the aerodynamics sort of kick in by the time it gets up to this sort of altitude. Put simply, there really isn't a lot here beyond blurred screens and a released projectile that came very close to destroying their kit. Naturally, that's not what was reported. It was all about how this was a game changer that was going to revolutionize satellite launches, while quietly glossing over that they'd achieved none of the critical breakthrough technologies that you would need to do that. So is it possible that a machine like this could work in the future? Well, it's not impossible, but honestly, this machine does nothing to alleviate any of my concerns. It delivers 2% of the energy required to throw this shell at the promised 5,000 miles per hour. With probably one of the things that concerns me the most being there's no signs that this machine can actually pull down and hold the serious vacuum you would need. With one of the main concerns being the bearings are not enclosed. There are no serious vacuum systems in the world that have large bearing feed-throughs like this, because it's virtually impossible to stop gas bleeding through the bearings. And you'll recall from my Hyperloop videos of just how small a pinhole you need to actually completely trash a good vacuum system. Then you take a look at their founder, who's got to be a real high flyer, right? I mean, he's planning to launch constellations of satellites in days. Well, that's never going to happen. Even if you can get all of this to work perfectly, every time you launch something, you break the seal on the vacuum system, you vent the entire system, meaning that it's going to be hours to pump it down again. And their CEO seems to have no qualifications other than 1,000 hours of flying planes and being a serial entrepreneur, which is jolly sporting, but I can't find anything else that he's actually been an entrepreneur in.
That was the inspiration for Spinlaunch. We basically asked the question,
is there a way to get to space without a rocket?
I really took a look at it from just a fresh perspective, and that's when the idea of a rotational accelerator came up.
Sure, it's not impossible that someone whose apparent professional training consists of 1,000 hours flying planes was sat there one day thinking, how can we revolutionize spaceflight forever? And came up with the idea that would do it.
It demonstrates an absolute awesome opportunity for expansion into the last available frontier.
And it's not impossible that a 19-year-old with no experience could invent a machine that would revolutionize blood testing. But I wouldn't bet on it. It's also worth mentioning that because you're putting so much energy into this spinning thing, if there's any failure on this thing whatsoever, well, let's just get an idea of what that might look like by watching a wind turbine fail at a fraction of the speed of this thing. Yeah, if this ever makes it to being a launch facility, the whole thing would have to be evacuated every time this thing is spun up. Because in the event of a failure, you're going to get shrapnel flying everywhere at about 7 times the speed of sound. You know, railgun bullet type velocities. But of course, the Spinlaunch people have thought this through in great detail, which is why their control center is directly adjacent to the centrifuge. Massive reliance on computer-generated artistic impressions of how it will really work. 7 seconds of a prototype of some sort working, followed by 20 seconds of reaction shots, and an actual achievement that could be outclassed in every significant sense by a 100-year-old battleship gun. How would that score in the game of Vaporware unicorns overpromise and underdeliver?
That's a bingo.
And that is today's daily dose of sanity. If you enjoyed it, drop a thumbs up on it. If you don't want to miss out on more videos like this, how shall we say, redressing some of the over-optimistic and very gullible mainstream media coverage, then you can always subscribe. And as ever, if you really like the work of this channel and want to support it directly, you can do it through Patreon. And thanks for watching.